stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's on now, I think.
Yeah,
I did hit the button. I guess it didn't go on.
that happens.
Thank you, Mr. Blaine. Next item on the agenda is election of the chairman of the board. I'll open the floor to nominations. Does anyone have a nomination for chairman of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll nominate David Blaine to serve as chairman of the authority board.
May I have a second, please?
Second?
All in favor? Are there any other nominations?
I move the nominations be closed for chairman.
Thank you. The nominations are closed. All in favor of electing Mr. Blaine as chairman of the authority board, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Mr. Blaine.
Congratulations.
All right. Hey, on a serious note, I just want to say to the board members, thank you very much for this honor and this privilege to serve the township and the municipality as the chairman of the municipal authority. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. And on to some really cool stuff tonight. Are we excited in the crowd? Is everybody fired up? All right, here we go. All right, so the first item of business will be to reorganize as a board, and we will entertain motions for election of the vice chairman of the board.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to have the vice chairman be Gary Chrisman, please.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second?
A motion and a second for Mr. Chrisman as vice chairman. Any other nominations? Hearing none, I think we do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Mr. Chrisman, congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
We are now going to entertain a motion for, or now we're going to elect secretary of the board. Is there any nominations for secretary?
Mr. Chairman, I'll nominate Chris Judd as secretary for the board, for authority board.
All right, there's nomination for Mr. Judd. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mrs. Lindsay. Any other nominations? All right, I think we can do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Mr. Judd, welcome. Now we will entertain nominations for treasurer of the board.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we approve, or I nominate Robin Lindsay to serve as the authority treasurer.
Mr. Chrisman, thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Any other further nominations? All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right, Mrs. Lindsay. Assistant Secretary will entertain nominations for Assistant Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, I'll nominate Mr. Zumas as the assistant secretary to the authority board.
Thank you, Mr. Chrisman. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second for Mr. Zumas for Assistant Secretary. Any other nominations? Hearing none, we'll do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right. We have a call coming in.
Not any longer.
All right. All right, let's go to appointment of the authority solicitor. The chair will make a motion to appoint the law offices of Stephen Stein.
Are there any other recommendations, Mr. Chairman?
Any other recommendations from other than
Mr.
Mr.
Chair,
Stein?
I would like to nominate Steve Stein to serve as the authority solicitor.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any other nominations? All right, hearing none, we can do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so carried. All right, the appointment of the authority stormwater engineer. This will be for the stormwater portion of what the municipal authority does. Any nominations for authority stormwater engineer?
I can't bring it up.
Mr. Chairman, I'll nominate HRG as our stormwater engineer.
Thank you, Mrs. Lindsay. Is there a second?
Second.
I can't bring it up on my screen.
Second by Mr. Judd. Is there any other nominations for authority stormwater engineer? All right.
Skip one.
Hearing none, we'll take this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? So carried. Well, congratulations, HRG. Now we'll do the appointment of the authority sanitary sewer engineer.
Is it the same one?
Chair will entertain any nominations for sanitary sewer engineer.
Mr. Chairman, I'll nominate HRG to serve in that capacity.
In the capacity of
No, I think it's GHD.
GHD,
GHD, sorry.
GHD,
Yes.
HRG, IMB, CMA.
Choose 3 letters.
It's
All
okay,
right.
it's okay. Kevin,
R2D2.
you're Kevin,
RT,
you're sweating.
I don't have, I can't get to my attachments.
Somebody with three letters in their name, right?
Yeah, sure.
So, all right,
Choose
so
any, ABC.
So we're going to appoint GHD as the authority sanitary sewer engineer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Zumas. Any other nominations? All right, hearing none, we can do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right, GHD, welcome. All right, we're going to establish,
I got GHD.
we're going to establish the regular meetings scheduled
Thank
for
you,
the
Brad.
board. And the regular meetings will be the 4th Tuesday of the months of February, May, August, and November will be the standard board meetings. There will also be the availability of special board meetings on the 3rd Tuesday of the other months outside the 4 months I just mentioned. So that would be January, March, April, June, July, September, October, and December, in the event that we need those meetings. But the standard meetings would be those fourth Tuesdays of February, May, August, and November. I don't think we need to have a motion for that, right? I think we're good there. All right. Hearing nothing else at this point in time, we can. We good? Okay. Hearing nothing at this point in time, then we can go to the general business meeting for the general authority. So the first item of business would be the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Everybody should have a copy of those joint meeting minutes from November 19th, 2019. Is there any comments on those board minutes?
Ready for a motion?
Ready for a motion, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the minutes of November the 19th, 2019 as prepared and circulated.
Mr. Christman, thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Judd. Any other further comments?
It's getting quicker.
We're moving along. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right, now's the time for public comment. So public comment would be anything that is not on the agenda to be covered tonight. So as long as if there's anybody in the public out there that wants to talk about something that's related to the storm sewer or the sanitary sewer that's not covered on the agenda tonight, we would ask that you come up to the podium where Mr. Weaver's standing currently and occupying. Obviously, he's on the move, but is there any public comment?
Is Mr. Weaver here for public comment?
No, sir.
All right, seeing no public comment, is there any board member comments at this point?
I'll need to welcome Bob officially.
Bob, welcome to the board. Do you want to just kind of give a little background on yourself there, Bob?
My name is Robert Oakes. New to the authority. Have a background 15 years in the sewer department. Figured I'd like to see things from the other side of the table, so that's why I'm here.
All right.
Thank you for
Welcome
having
there.
me.
How about 3 adjectives?
Oh,
All right, here we go.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the first item of business under the Stormwater Fund. Will be action on amendment number 1 to the Stormwater Sewer Fee and Sanitary Sewer Rental Billing and Collection Policy, Farmland Revisions. Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you may recall, the board directed staff to investigate Mr. Kessler's request to evaluate a new billing methodology for farmland. Mr. Kessler came to the last authority meeting, presented a map showing that he's not afforded the luxury of getting a single-family residential bill for his house equal to other residents in the township. He proposed that we redistribute the impervious service to his house that belongs there for his driveway, and then do a separate bill for the commercial part, which is the farm. So staff looked into this division of SFR versus NSFR, and we prepared a new impervious surface map, which staff supports the proposal from Mr. Kessler because it is reasonable for farmers to be afforded the opportunity to get a single-family residential bill because it is possible under our GIS program to divide out the driveway and the house. So therefore, we've taken the stormwater user fee, sewer rental billing and collection policy and proposed an amendment number 1, D, crop farming, which basically will have a new user fee for property owners that are identified as farming operation having impervious surface to be recalculated using the alternative billing method. And this method allows for the separation of the farmhouse and driveway from the NSFR impervious surface. The properties will receive 2 separate bills, a flat rate for the farmhouse and a separate bill for the remaining NSFR impervious surface. And it's really that simple. There is just one change from my memo. I did get this today late, the new map from GHD did the impervious surface showing the house and the commercial, and Mr. Kessler took a rough map and did some calculations. So he came up with a new bill of 7.2 ERUs, but we're coming up with 9.1. His property would actually receive a new bill for 9.1, which will reduce his bill by 9 ERUs because it's currently 16.1 ERUs. So I think he'll be satisfied. And we've determined that there's 14 other farms that will be eligible for this. The total loss in revenue is only approximately $12,000. And we collect 4.1 annually, so it's not really a blip on the revenue side. So staff recommends approval of amendment number 1. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Now, is it our obligation to let these other properties know about this new policy?
Well, surprisingly, we sent them a letter and they didn't respond. I'm not sure if they got the letter or what happened, but I talked to Mr. Stein and our engineer, and we believe that we can just go ahead and do the bill, because if we're going to do it for one, we should do it for all. So basically, we will send them a letter saying your bill's been reduced. So I don't think they'll complain.
Okay.
I don't think they will.
And then,
Any other questions for Mr. Weaver at this point?
No.
Bill, then you'll get in touch with Eric after we take care of this tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I think he gave a very good presentation the last time.
Right.
So.
I think so too.
Bill, just for clarification, they're actually all going to come in one envelope, right?
Correct. We'll save on postage.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion on the action.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve amendment number 1, stormwater user fee, sewer rental billing and collection policy regarding the, well, that is the collection, that is the amendment. Sorry, I don't need to.
You're not going to add anything else there,
right.
Mr. Christman?
No, on the
All
farm
right.
properties.
Thank you, Mr. Christman. We have a
It is what
motion
it
on the
is.
floor to approve the amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Zumas. Any other further discussion? Hearing none, I think we can do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? So carried. All right, down to township reports under the Stormwater Fund. First item is draft Stormwater Management Program credit and incentives policy. Turn it back over there to you, Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you may recall, as part of the 2020 budget, the board authorized staff to entertain a proposal from HRG to prepare a credit policy draft for the authority to consider. We did sign that proposal. They provided an outline for the board to review tonight. We've also worked on a schedule to implement the policy. That's attached to the draft credit policy. So essentially, we're looking at a year to finalize the policy at the last meeting in November with the 2021 budget and start implementing in January. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for the board to comment. We'll have a meeting in May and then a meeting in August before we present it to the public. So I didn't feel it necessary to have Kevin Fox and Adrian here from HRG's financial group because initially we just wanted to provide an outline. We don't have the audit done yet, so we don't know what stormwater revenue is carrying over from 2019 to put in the rate structure. We do have good news. The initial rate structure based on the unaudited financial statement shows that we don't have to increase rates to implement a credit policy. And we also will have 3 alternatives to the board to look at in May that also may include the ability to use some surplus money in a few years to offset a future bond issue.
Okay.
So the outline has 17 credits, which is pretty typical that HRG is doing. Jason can probably speak more to it, but 60 to 70 policies right now, Jason. So the 17 credits that are available can be, of course, amended by the board based on your desire. There are basically 2 things I want to point out, actually 3. There's 2 examples on there. If you want to go to the very end, Brad, there's a example of a adopt an inlet. So residents will be afforded the opportunity to get a credit as part of an adopt an inlet program. In addition, let me just get to that page while he's pulling that up.
Okay, there's the application.
So the adopted inlet will grant customers a 10% credit for participating in an adopted inlet program. Basically, it's just maintaining the inlet in their neighborhood, making sure the leaves are not in the inlet, so it has the inlet operating properly. And the other one is a low-impact parcel, which it was the board's desire to help farmers because we've met with the farmers, and they have a hardship where the taxes that they're paying the taxes that they're paying and the revenue they're making break even. And with the new stormwater fee, they're basically in a deficit situation. So with the new billing methodology, reducing their bill, we also have the opportunity for them to get a low impact parcel. And this is basically just dividing the total acreage of the property compared to the impervious surface. And if you're basically equal to or less than 10%, then you can get up to a 30% credit on your stormwater fee. So this is right now available to residential or commercial. So not just farmers. I know Mr. DeSanto had reached out to me regarding the country club, and he wanted to make sure that the board was aware that he would like to be afforded opportunities for credit for his country club, which after meeting with HRG initially, he has several opportunities under those credit alternatives. He has the low impact parcel, stream bank restoration, partnerships, fertilizer management. So he actually has 4 or 5 that he would be able to take advantage of. So there's 2 issues just for today, because it's just an outline that I just wanted to make the board aware of, that staff doesn't have a firm recommendation on, and that's the low impact parcel for residential properties. Since we don't have a tiered program, we're going to kind of drill down on that with HRG because in theory, people in Hunt Club and bigger houses with acre lots could get a 30% credit on their stormwater fee, where people across the street are paying $32. So the optics are sort of not great. So one of the options the board may want to consider down the road when HRG comes to present this plan is potentially eliminating the residential low impact parcel credit and just making it available for commercial. So that's something that at least staff is kicking around with HRG. And the second one on there is rain barrels. We don't have a strong affinity for supporting rain barrels. Now Randy is doing something next month with the Dauphin County Conservation District, where the township is partnering with the county, right, Randy, to do a partnership on giving away 50 rain barrels. So we certainly support rain barrels. The issue is the management of Randy and HRG, depending on because we have such a large township, and just for argument's sake, to exaggerate, you could have 17,000 people have rain barrels, and so I don't think Randy's going to be able to inspect those every year. They have to have an operation and maintenance agreement. You have to go out and make sure they're working properly. Otherwise, you shouldn't get the credit. So it's a difficult thing. I mean, most people are doing rain barrels, but they do have to have an operation and a maintenance agreement, and we're not sure of the net benefit to the township authority or the stormwater system. So we just wanted to point that out to have you start considering that, and then we can drill down a little bit more about that in May and give you more of a presentation about those issues, so you're not just talking about it, we can give you some drawings to look at to give you some examples. Other than that, staff has no more comments on the outline. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Again, Bill, just to make sure, right now, this is just in draft. We still, it's for the board members to review, come back with comments to you. We're going to probably meet again on this at our May meeting.
Correct.
Discuss this in more detail after you've had some more time. And Brad, how are you, big guy?
Doing great, sir. Thank you.
You good? You doing good?
Awesome.
You just showed up out of nowhere, man.
I love these meetings.
No, you love it. I love it.
I love authority.
So after both of you have a little bit more time to kind of hone in the details of this, we'll have a more detailed meeting in May to kind of go over the more detailed specifics of this for potential adoption sometime over the summer. Correct?
That's a good summation. Yes, we will continue to work on it, and we will have a final document in May.
There's a lot here to digest. It's just,
Yeah.
and it's a big change with the credits. So,
I have a couple questions, Mr. Chairman, for Mr. Weaver.
Sure.
Number one, the May situation, that will be after you do some revisions, I'm sure, to this, or at least you're going to look at it and refine it for us in May.
Well,
Or maybe not.
this
Okay,
is an
maybe you're.
okay. So this is an outline. So
Right.
HRG will provide more examples of the adopt a credit. They'll have more explanation of what these credits are and what you have to do to achieve compliance. So this was not a complete document. It'll be a little thicker.
It's a working document right
Yes,
now.
yep.
Okay. But then at what point in time will we invite other people to come in and share their thoughts with us before we were to finalize it? Are we going to see it in May and then have an opportunity after that for community members to look at it as well, i.e. Mr. DeSanto and other people who may have an interest, a direct interest, obviously?
So certainly, HRG in May will be prepared to answer questions from the public. So if they want to come to the meeting in May and ask questions, we
So it
can
would
do
be a
that
combined meeting of us with any community members?
if they choose.
Okay.
And August as well. But aside from that, we are going to have separate community meetings in October.
Okay.
That Randy and Ralph Tellis and George and Leanne did, where they met with the church groups and residents, and there was about 4 or 5 developers. There was a segregated different residential, so we broke them out. So we thought that worked pretty well, so we're going to follow that same format.
Okay.
Once the board approves it and sets us free, we're going to go to the public and then present it to them.
Okay. A couple more questions.
Yeah.
Next question. From what I read here, it appears to me, and again, I'm the novice, doesn't have the expertise that all of you who work with this on a regular basis. This is similar to, at least from what I know from other municipalities, and the one I know that fits the closest for model would be the one that currently exists in Hershey. Am I right, wrong?
You're correct. Dairy Township.
I don't know. It's
believe-
not exactly, but it certainly appears to me similar to that. I
I
don't
think,
know.
Jason, wasn't that the first one you did?
Yeah, if not
I'm
the first.
I'm
it
not
was-
saying I'm not firing bullets. I'm just simply saying it appears as though we have a model it's similar to Hershey. Are we then? And that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, I assume you've already looked at other municipalities to see what they're doing. Obviously, we can take a model, but we have to customize it to meet our needs as well.
Correct. That's exactly what we're doing. We're using the past policies and credit policies that we've developed in Hershey and other municipalities, and using those as a guide and tailoring it to the needs of the township.
Okay. And then as a follow-up to that, and I don't know who it needs to go to, but when this plan is implemented with the credits, what does that do in turn? I know what it does, but to what extent? Does it involve staff reviewing all the applications, doing the approvals, setting the percentage for each of those properties? I have to believe that there's some time consumption in that process, and have we, Jason, maybe it's you, have we looked at that at other municipalities who have gone this route, and what time is consumed in staff and that sort of thing? And maybe I'm going into the weeds too early.
No, that's a great question, because I did forget to mention this. Jason and I have already spoke about this. I failed to mention the application form. We haven't decided on an application fee to directly answer your question. HRG does not do it for other clients, but we prefer, if an engineer is going to submit a huge document detailing a detention basin calculation. We need an engineer to review it, so we're going to ask HRG to do that. Some other minor things, rain barrels, adopted inlet, I think Randy and Jeff and Tim and I can handle that. Unless, Jason, you want to do that.
Does that
too.
mean if you grant a credit for rain barrel, who's going to go out and drive around and monitor that they're actually using rain barrels?
Well,
I know I'm going into the weeds, but again,
Yes.
it's one of these situations where we pass an ordinance and then the police department can't implement it because they don't have the manpower. I'm using that as the parallel.
well, as Steve always says, I don't want to speak for Steve, but Steve, they can set their own policy. They don't have to review it every year, right? I mean, that's something you need to consider. You can put rain barrels out there and bless them and do it every 2 or 3 years or whatever you desire, really, right, Steve?
And again, maybe
Correct.
and maybe I'm going into the weeds too far too quickly.
No, that's a great point because I apologize. I did want to mention that one of the things that we haven't determined yet is what the application fees are going to be, and they may vary, and you may want to consider waiving it because it's going to be tough to calculate it. We don't want to get into escrows, which is on the agenda later, which can get real complicated. So from talking to the other townships, it's kind of a mixed bag. Some of them charge $25, which doesn't cover your cost. And some of them charge more. So it's kind of all over the place. So we're going to drill down on that and come up with at least some kind of educated guess on what we think is a...
And that's fine, thank you. As long as that I know you're thinking about it. And then my final question is, I'm assuming, and I don't like to assume anything ever, but the goal and objective is for implementation in January 2021.
That's correct.
Okay.
So when I was listening earlier, I wasn't sure if I heard correctly. You said you didn't anticipate there being administrative costs for this. Did I hear that wrong?
There will be administrative costs because we'll have to get a proposal from HRG to review the credit applications. We don't...
Yeah.
Tim is too busy with the sewer work. He could do it, but he wouldn't have the time.
I mean,
So-
as far as hiring people and...
Well, it's not something that's a full. You're talking about maybe. I apologize. I forget. I think it was 10%. We're betting on 10% credits.
Okay,
So
I know we're going down the
No,
road
these are
already.
great questions.
But I know as we take the next several weeks and months to consider these, in my head, am I supposed to be thinking about potential administrative costs? And
No,
am I
no.
supposed to be thinking about as well that we're going to be losing revenue?
Right. So I can give you an example. It's all over the place. It really depends on the township and your community. So Derry Township has done 2,000 credit applications, and they didn't hire anyone. They did it internally. Hampton Township has done like 20. And again, Derry Township, they have credits for everything. They do rain barrels. So what I would anticipate, without drilling down a whole lot yet, is that HRG will do the real complicated detention basin engineering ones, and Randy, Jeff, and Tim and I can handle the rest of them, and that won't really increase staff.
And if everybody, if all the potential people and you get a response rate that is average, if there is an average, do we know, that will reduce our fee revenue, right?
10%.
10%.
But we have extra money because we had additional ERUs than we expected. We started billing early, and we don't have our permit yet, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So we actually are afforded the luxury to offer credits, because normally when you remember this, so you're remembering Raftella said if you do credits, the fee's going to be higher.
Right.
That's why
Exactly.
That's ringing in my head. As we
Right.
talk
So
about
I apologize. I probably should have started with that.
it. So-
So because of the additional revenue from 19 that we didn't know when we're going to get our permit and start spending this money, we have extra revenue to offset rates. So we can keep the rate at the $32 that Raftella set and not increase it and still issue credits.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I would hope that we would continue in the same model that we've been following. Our first year, there were no credits. As we go into credits, let's take a few at a time and then build, rather than putting 34 credits out there, options, and then having to back off. That would be
Yeah.
my thinking. Let's again, we're creeping. Let's crawl, walk, then run.
Right.
I don't want to go from creep to run.
Yeah, and then just one last thing that we definitely do not support is retroactive payment of credits. So we billed for a year. You're going to get people that are going to say, well, I want it retroactive for 19. Well,
Right.
we spent the money, sorry. But I would recommend in the policy, but that, of course, is a board decision.
Right.
That'll be part of our presentation, that we don't recommend you do a retroactive.
I would say thank you for undertaking this major project.
Right. I think they'll be happy they'll be getting a credit. So that's,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah.
Bill, is there any benefit to discuss this or consult with Rotellus on any of these major changes?
We got the model from them, and it's been updated now that we have a year of data. So we've taken their model and we've manipulated it, and that's what HRG is going to be doing. What you're basically doing is getting a sort of a second peer review from HRG on the budget. That budget goes with the credit. They kind of marry. So if HRG has questions on what we did with Raftelis, we may have to reach out to them to say, hey, what were you thinking with these budget items? But most of it was really internal with Randy, Jeff, and Alicia and I. So I don't anticipate that we'll need them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bill, I just had a question. Were the application fees, some of them have yes and some of them have no. How did you decide which ones do and which ones don't?
We haven't decided because we don't really know what's appropriate yet.
Okay, well, I'm just looking, some say
Yeah.
no, some say yes.
So that was this kind of a boilerplate, like a mark to have something there to discuss. But when we come back in May, we'll have some sort of recommendation.
Right.
Okay.
Good.
And then Randy, I just had a question on the rain barrel seminar. It says that everybody gets a free rain barrel. Is that those real big? 55-gallon. Really? Oh, wow. Okay. Now, will they be picking them up here that night?
That's the intent.
Okay.
If there's a drought, that's canceled.
Okay. Okay. And I'm sure they're coming because they think that we're going to do a credit program on that.
I don't think.
Yeah.
I
You
think
don't
this
think
is
so?
no. This
Okay.
is Randy. Do you want to give him the mic there? Would you?
Why don't you? I tell you what. Why don't you just come to the
Yeah,
right up
yeah,
there?
yeah.
That way, for the secretary's sake, that you can give your name and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there you go. Yes, my name's Randy Allen. I work with Lower Paxton Township with the stormwater. As far as the rain barrel workshop, Dauphin County Conservation District was reaching out to the municipalities to see if anybody wanted to partner with them on a grant, which we did. And they received that grant for the rain barrels. So when during this rain barrel presentation, there's going to be a Stormwater 101 presentation by Dauphin County, and then the rain barrels get given away. So we have 50 of them. We already have them at one of our garages, and there's going to be some happy customers, I hope.
So they're not all residents of Lower Paxton. They are
No,
coming throughout
no,
Dauphin
right.
County. Okay.
It wasn't limited just to Lower Paxton.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And they're being picked up by the resident?
Yes, that will be picked up by the resident.
I can't imagine that everybody has the capability of getting a 55-gallon tub in their
There's going to be a
vehicle.
few complications, I'm sure, but
Yes,
we'll work
sure.
through it.
That's why we started with an early draft.
Mr. Ramsey, I think you have a question. Looked like you were trying to jump in.
Something off the top of my head, Bill. If we confirm these credits to individuals, is there any way that can be applied to MS4? Can
Yes.
we take credit on pollution
So,
reduction?
yeah. So the principal reason to give someone a credit is that we're going to get a benefit for water quality that will go to our MS4 permit. So HRG explained to me in the first meeting, because I had to ask him twice, it takes a little bit time to digest, is we have all fixed costs, but we have variable costs. The variable costs are the Chesapeake Bay, which the board's very aware of. Those variable costs can be adjusted through the programs that they're doing. So the variable cost is what allows the public to get credits. So I have to thank HRG. They did a great job explaining it to me, because to be honest with you, this is my first go at this too, and I didn't understand how credits work. But that's the simplified. They'll probably have a more technical one for you on May, but so you're right. These credits will afford us credits for a permit.
Pollution reduction in the Paxton Creek.
Not all of them, but yes, some of them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Good.
And that's how you get more percentages. But the maximum is 45.
All right. Any other questions for Bill on this matter? All right. Let's move on to the next item of business here, Bill, which is the update on televising of the private stormwater system at Hidden Lake.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you may recall we have a resident in Hidden Lake that has a stormwater manhole and piping that goes through her property that then goes down to the local stream there. There was a sinkhole that developed at the manhole. The manhole's 30 feet deep. It sunk a good 5 feet. Jeff went out, filled it up, put some fence around it. She sent a letter to the authority. We presented that to the board, requesting assistance for us to televise the storm pipe to determine what's wrong with the pipe. We were not able to do that. I'd like to turn it over to Tim because he worked more with our staff and he can explain what happened there.
Okay, so as Bill mentioned, the manhole itself is about 30 feet deep from the top of the manhole structure, the cover to the bottom of the channel. And in addition to that, there's an extra probably 4 or 5 feet between the grade, the surface, and that cover. So we're talking about, 35 feet down. Wow. Our staff went out, attempted to televise. They opened the manhole. They saw the depth, and at that point, they saw that it was also surcharged with water to the point probably about 3 or 4 feet up from the bottom of the manhole. So what we think, based on looking at the structure itself, we think that there's a considerable amount of sediment buildup in the manhole. So that would require our staff to enter this unsafe condition, go down 35 feet from the surface, and basically with our current capabilities, have to pull up buckets of sediment, 35 feet. So that's kind of just a summary of, how the attempt that was made, and we just don't feel like it's a safe condition to send our staff into.
Right.
So since we couldn't do it, we had HRG got some quotes. There's one in your packet, which Tim and Jason can tell you that they're not comfortable with this quote because they don't believe that includes all the necessary scope to do the work. And then Jason got another one, and I apologize, I didn't have time to put it in the packet. It's considerably more. I think it's $22,000 something. Jason, you want to tell them about that one?
Sure, that one was from USG, and that one was about $20,000 more than the one that's in your packet, so around $24,000. And that one, I feel, more accurately encompasses the level of effort that would be needed to assess the situation, opposed to the one that you see on the screen.
Jason, have you ever worked with them?
Yes, we have.
Okay. How about the one that we initially got?
Yes.
So both parties you've done business with? Okay.
Yes, and we reached out to a third, but hadn't received a response.
Okay. So what's the plan then? I mean, is
So
the plan here?
The plan's a little complicated because with our MS4 permit and what the responsibilities are of the authority with all the private stormwater systems in the township, we have over 40 to 50 miles of private sewer where the public road has the public sewer, goes into the private stormwater, and then goes into the creek. So after multiple meetings with Steve and Jason and Jeff and Tim and Randy and I, and speaking to EPA and DEP, most of the townships don't know how to handle this, so everyone is doing basically nothing because DEP and EPA are telling us it's not our responsibility, even though there's public water going into it. So it's staff belief that coming down the road, we're afraid that someday we may have a permit that says you got to fix this stuff, but that could be 10, 15 years. We don't know the answer to that. But right now, Steve is advising staff, and Steve can explain more, but he doesn't recommend the authority do any activity on the private systems unless you dedicate the whole system. And that way you can use public money for the private. So you take ownership of it. The problem with that is Tim has done some research, and we haven't had an engineer's estimate, but we've just explained to you the depth. It could be millions. I mean, you could look at $3-4 million easily. That's not in the Raftellus 5-year plan. We don't have a budget for that. And if you do it for Hidden Lake, then every development that was built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s could come in and say, hey, you did it for Hidden Lake, you got to do it for me. So essentially, I think we're aligned. Jason and Steve can chime in, but I think staff, engineer, and solicitor all agree that we are recommending the authority until the courts or DEP tell us not to take over these private systems. And I think, Steve, if you do work on a property, you can't do that with a temporary easement. So you'd have to dedicate the whole pipe down to the creek, correct?
That's correct. Because you can't spend public money on a private facility.
So is it possible to approve the quote that's not actually doing any repair or replacement work, or is that still considered using public money
Still
to do?
using public money.
Yeah. So I think the conclusion is that unfortunately,
Sounds to me like the conclusion is there's not much we can do.
no, because our staff can't do it. Tim's saying it's not safe for us to go down there. That we can't pay someone $25,000, and ultimately, the problem for her is the property owner is not going to be happy because the ultimate recommendation is for her to fix it, and she's not going to have the money. She's going to come into the board, the engineer and the solicitor, and say sorry, but so I would recommend that you authorize staff to basically send her a letter and say we apologize, but we can't TV it. We're not allowed to use public money to pay a contractor to do it. And just have to leave it at that for now. That's our recommendation. I'll be happy to answer any other questions, and Tim and Jeff and Jason can chime in as well.
Is there any other questions for Mr. Weaver at this point?
The portion of that pipe that's going through, it's actually on this person's property. It's not the homeowners association's responsibility.
Tim did some research, and do you want to explain what you found there, Tim?
Yeah, there's an HOA for Hidden Lake, but this particular set of this phase, it was different, so it wasn't part of what the HOAs covered. So it was kind of different. We don't typically see that, but the HOA that covers that entire rest of that development doesn't cover that small piece.
Oh, my.
Are they aware of this, do you know? The HOA, are they aware of this situation?
I don't know. It's
Okay.
more of Randy and Jeff were talking
not,
with the resident in the
just
beginning.
curious.
I don't even know if we're sure that there is an active HOA.
Right,
the
that's
other
what we
thing.
found out.
That's the other thing.
There's a couple different HOAs in that whole area over there.
I pulled up on the county GIS website, and there's a plot of land behind all those townhomes that did list that parcel under an HOA. But how accurate that is, I don't know. You did much more research than I did.
Yeah, I guess it would be one of those situations where it goes from public, like where it's taking our street runoff, and then it goes onto this property that might not be covered by the HOA, and then the next property that it sounds like it might be, part of that HOA. So it's even more complicated.
Is this a safety issue? Because it's a huge
Well,
hole over there.
We went down that road. Steve, we tried. Steve's advising us that a safety issue in private property is not a public safety issue because it's not on public property. Is that right, Steve?
Well, it depends where it exists. If it exists in the middle of the property, then you're not going to have anybody else walking on the property in that area. But if it's like by a sidewalk or something like that, that's a little different.
But isn't she an N, I remember going over there, isn't she an N unit?
Yes, she's an end unit, but it's not close to any walkway. It's
Okay.
pretty far in, right, Tim?
We visited that unit.
Yeah.
It's
Remember,
probably
it's down behind the unit or the home.
Probably like 30 to 40 feet from, a sidewalk.
Okay. Any other questions? I don't know if we can give you authorization because we would have to, because this is under township reports. And it's not, can we take action on that?
I think so. Can
I mean,
Steve, they
we
can
take
make a
action on
motion?
giving him out? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, well then, is there a motion on the floor to authorize the Sewer Authority Director to send the property owner a letter notifying the property owner of the status of the project from how we see it?
I think, yeah, I agree, and I think the letter needs to include the fact that we're legally bound, to provide funds only for public sector, and this is private, and therefore legally we're not allowed. I just think a little explanation would be helpful to the owner, because obviously they're going to have to bear the responsibility, which is very unfortunate. I'm thinking you're saying, why can't it be as simple as calling Roto-Rooter and have them stick it down and, clear it out and the water flows? But obviously, when you involve manpower, then you have a health and safety issue for life. That becomes a greater issue.
We can certainly put that part in the letter, legally bound.
Yeah, I think that'll, yeah.
Okay.
Before you go any further, we might need some direction here too. Back when she came to the township, we filled the hole back in by, on request of the Board of Supervisors. So now we would have to go back in there and finish that job, so to speak. So is that an issue?
I was gonna say, can we do that? That's private.
Well, Steve said if we did anything, we need to get a temporary easement.
Right.
What we left there was a pipe. The manhole is, like Tim said, about 6 feet underground. So we left an access to it. That would have to come out.
Okay.
So
Is there
you
still
need an easement for that?
Yeah, you just can't go onto private property and do work. You're going to have some sort of an easement.
Right.
But they were already on private property
Right.
doing the work.
Well, it was sort of it was a granted by letter. I mean, she sent us a letter requesting us to go out, and I sent her an email saying the board authorized it. So, I mean, we have sort of a granted temporary easement, but Steve wants that perfected a little better. Attorneys are really particular about legal documents.
Well, we have to.
So it sounds to me like what we need to do is send this nice lady a letter stating the findings in our position in regards to the work, and that we request that she give us a temporary easement to come back onto her property to remove the temporary access that we have to the manhole.
We can do that.
Does everybody agree with that?
Yes, I think
I mean, I
that's a
don't
good
think we
solution.
actually have to have a motion on that or anything, correct? We just,
Right.
Yeah, just go ahead and do that, Bill.
Okay. I think she'll appreciate us filling the hole in for her because,
Right.
but she won't be satisfied. You'll be hearing from her again, I'm sure.
Well, Bill, she's
Okay.
only going to be happy if you're over there filling that hole in for her.
Absolutely.
There
We'll
we
try.
go. All right, I think we're down to update on the PADEP NPDES permit for municipal separate storm sewer system MS4s and the joint PRP.
Yes, board members, Jason will be giving a report on this next as well as the engineer's report, but just from staff level, I wanted to update a few things quickly. I talked to Erin Latavic from HRG, and the permit has been submitted, and she didn't see any benefit to call and keep asking DEP when we're going to get our permit, because there is an advantage for us not to get it because the clock doesn't start till we get the permit. So we are afforded to have that revenue to keep our rates lower. So that was the first part of that. The second two parts are, Jason will give you an update on the Stone Bridge, so I won't go into that. But staff met with Steve and HRG. We did hire Erin Latavic as a task for her to represent the township for any matters regarding our PRP plan. And she was instrumental in giving comments to PennDOT in this collaborative joint stream bank restoration project. So PennDOT has a pilot project through EPA, and they're getting $1 million. And our consortium with Susquehanna and CRW and Lower Paxton are going to give $1 million. our share is a lot more because our share is 57%, so we're going to give 570,000 of the million. But we're all going to share this credit, so we're going to share in $2 million of credit, which we get a lot of credit because we're the larger percentage. This is supposed to be out to bid in a few days. It'll be on PennDOT's webpage, and we'll see some activity here real soon. That'll be a 5-year contract, and someone's just going to bid sediment removal. They can basically bid on any of the projects that's in our PRP, but we did exclude Stonebridge and Lower Paxton because we've authorized HRG to do that, and Jason will give you an update on that. But I wanted to give the board some update on that because since the last meeting, we've had a lot of activity, and I wanted to make you aware that things are proceeding. We don't have a permit, but HRG has recommended that, hey, you can do this work because the comments were really about our 13 BMPs. The DEP is not going to come back and say, don't do those. So we didn't see any risk with starting the design for Stonebridge, having the PennDOT project out to bid. We expect all this work to occur by the time we get the permit, so you won't see any construction happen for a few months.
Who's all in the joint project again? Susquehanna, us?
There's two. There's Susquehanna, CRW, and Lower Paxton. That's the one group. But now we're partnering with PennDOT, so we have that group where, actually I'm kind of screwing that up, Jason, because I think PennDOT's actually part of our PRP plan, correct? We have a separate agreement with Susquehanna and CRW, but PennDOT's actually part of our PRP as well, which is allowing us to partner with them. Is that right?
PennDOT's not actually part of the original partnership that the PRP was developed. The original partnership was just Lower Paxton Township, Susquehanna Township, and CRW on behalf of the city of Harrisburg. PennDOT's involvement comes kind of after the fact of putting that original plan in place, kind of as another mechanism to help those entities in the joint planning area meet the goals of the plan through basically offering funding in support of the projects that the plan outlines.
So that's a great benefit to the authority. By cooperating in this consortium, PennDOT would not have reached out to just Lower Paxton individually or Susquehanna individually. Because we're in a group,
Right.
that's more attractive.
And that's why I wanted to make sure I knew the names. I think people, Brad, maybe we can publicize that a little bit going forward. I think people like to see that we're working together,
right?
Knowing that all the waterways go through everybody's, boundaries and stuff like that. It's a good story.
Good.
The other point about the credits that will be received is whatever amount of pounds of sediment get removed for that $2 million, everybody gets the full credit.
Right.
It's not like you divide them up into 4 pieces.
That's nice.
Everybody gets the
Okay.
whole credit.
Right.
Good.
That'll be nice. Okay.
That's all I have for township reports. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions at this point for Mr. Weaver? If not, we're going to go to the engineer's report from HRG.
Thank you.
Your time limited here.
Yeah, I'll be brief. So
No,
we
just
could,
kidding with you. Just kidding with you.
conclude the stormwater portion of the meeting at least. Touch on some of the highlights since the previous reporting period. Mr. Weaver just mentioned that the updated joint pollution reduction plan was submitted to DEP at the end of December. We're awaiting a response for their review. We've advanced several design projects that we've been working with staff on, most notably the Stonebridge Apartment Stream Restoration Project and the BC 7 and 8 Drainage Improvements Project. Several projects have moved to the construction phase since the last report. Mainly the storage facility project was bid, awarded, and construction actually commenced earlier this week on that project. The BC 2A through C and 5B project, which you'll be getting a more in-depth update on later, has begun, and some of the stormwater portions of that project are underway. With that, I will open it up to any questions that the board may have on the remainder of the report.
Any board member comments for HRG on the report? All right, hearing none, let's go. And that's the end of the Stormwater Fund part of the meeting. So if you're here for the stormwater and you don't want to listen to sanitary sewer next, feel free to exit. Right there's the door. So if you feel like you need to stay for the sanitary sewer, look at this. Look at this. They said I had enough. I had enough. We're moving on. So. All right, sanitary sewer fund. We're going to start with some new business here. Action on a request from Four Seasons to investigate the private sewer system for possible future dedication to the authority. So I believe Mr. Zaranin is in the audience.
I am.
And I think you're the one that's going to present, correct?
Well, actually, I understood that staff had a recommendation. My letter, I think.
Could you come up to the podium?
Yeah,
Thank
why don't
you.
you I was going to say, why don't you come up to the podium and give your name, address, serial number, all that kind of good stuff.
Certainly.
Hey, I got your name right, too. Did you notice
You
that?
did. That was excellent. I'm
There you go.
impressed. My name is Steve Zaranin. I'm an attorney with Wickswanger and Widener representing Four Seasons Homeowners Association. As my letter from January 21 mentioned, the association would like to dedicate its entire sanitary sewer system to the authority. When that was investigated by staff, though, they determined that there were probably some potential problems with the easement areas. We had a meeting with staff to address some of those, and staff and council were happy with our responses. They think there's one deck that may be interfere with an easement, which the association, if the dedication is accepted, would be happy to resolve that issue. The association has the authority to be able to take care of that if that's the easement issue. So we're down to really the issue of whether the system itself has integrity. And in order to do that, we think it needs to be TV'd. We think staff can do that with the resources that you have. And here we're just asking for you to authorize staff to video the system to make sure that there's no major problems, because if there are, we certainly would want to address those before we offer it for dedication.
Okay.
I have one question. Is
Sure.
that using public funds on a private system?
I think it is not. You're using staff time as opposed to putting it out for bid to another contractor to do it. So staff is able to do that, much like they did the work for the lady that, as I understood, with the stormwater issue we talked about earlier, staff was able to go out and do that. It's only when they had to say, our staff can't do it, we have to hire a separate contractor, that you're using different funds to do that. And the other difference here is that we want to dedicate the entire system. As you talked about earlier, staff, if you're going to take it over, we want to dedicate the entire system. We'll give you all the easements that are necessary to do that. So I think there's a big difference between the two.
And to address Mr. Ramsey's question, I think the difference here between the stormwater example and the sanitary sewer example is that we don't want to have a private system with two developments that don't have any joint maintenance agreement. So right now, if the sewer fails, Four Seasons and 12 Trees don't have any agreement who's going to fix it. We addressed this with Mr. Wendell years ago, and this is when we started. It's ironically on the agenda next. Is when I started here 25 years ago, I recommended to the board that we start a sewer extension agreement program with dedication. Prior to my starting here, the old board, the old solicitor did not believe that was necessary. So Steve has advised the board previously that in order to dedicate the sewer, you have to have an easement and a dedication document. Well, that was never done. You have two private sewers connected, and they need to be public. They're paying a sewer bill, and it's a shared sewer. So that's the difference between the stormwater example. We intend, in other words, if the development was built today, we would have dedicated the sewer. So that's the difference. Steve, do you have an issue with anything else?
No.
Okay.
Mr. Weaver, what's our estimated cost to do the investigation and the assessment? Do we have a number?
I'll pass this back to Jim.
No, we don't have
We don't have a number, okay. What, I didn't know if there was an estimated number, since the request is being made for us to authorize the investigation. I didn't know if there was any estimate of cost to do the assessment.
I'm going to say 2 weeks, maybe.
Jim,
Sorry.
no, that's all right. Jim's saying it'd probably take staff anywhere between a week to 2 weeks. So you have a 2-man crew. So you're looking at, maybe a couple $1,000s in labor.
Salary, labor, salary, benefits, loaded. Yeah, it can't be more than a couple grand, right?
Right, and the intent, though, is that we do want to dedicate it because it is private, and we want to be able to maintain it in the future.
I understand.
Yeah.
So Bill, let me get this right. They pay us their quarterly bill.
Right.
But if the sewer should fail, then the HOA is responsible to have
No,
that fixed?
There is no HOA.
Okay.
So basically, this is on the agenda next, and I'll go into more detail, but we have, prior to 96, there was no dedication process. You had developments from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s that were never dedicated to the authority. So you have miles and miles of private sewer out there. And Steve basically says you have to dedicate those in order to maintain them.
Right.
If the sewer would fail, this is the other difference between stormwater and sanitary in terms of the regulatory authorities. Under the Act 537 plan, the township is responsible for the management of all municipal waste. And that definition includes everything, trash, sewer, everything. So if their sewer line would break, DEP would call us and say, you got to go fix that. And we would say it's private. And they're going to say, we don't care. Under the Act 537 regulations, you have to fix it. So we have to go fix it and then go bill them. Well, the problem with all these private systems, you don't know who owns them. So, and the other part of this is why we wanted it public is the property owner that owns the property next to Four Seasons, they're going to connect into the sewer someday. So now you have another person that's going to connect with another development, and you have two private. This is why you have public sewers. And Jeff Wendell, when I asked him, would he agree with this old policy that the authority did, he said, well, that's the board's desire. For whatever reason they did that. But as an engineer and as a rate maker, he was saying that everyone pays a bill.
Right.
So in theory, you should dedicate all sewers.
Exactly.
Yeah, to the public.
Okay. Well,
And then
makes
that gives
sense.
us more control.
Right. And then
Yeah,
you
at
know
this
they're
point, it
fixed
makes-
right if there is an issue.
Right, and that's why staff and solicitor, I can't speak for Steve, but I think he did recommend that we should dedicate this sewer line.
Okay.
Because
I
it's
think it makes
shared.
perfect sense to do the
I
investigation,
mean, they're getting
Mr.
billed,
Chairman.
so, yeah.
ready for a
Mr.
motion?
Crispin?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve our staff to investigate the private sewer system for possible future dedication to the authority from Four Seasons.
Thank you, Mr. Crispin. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mrs. Lindsay. Any further discussion?
Just
Yeah,
a
yes.
quick question. Is there any limitation on the investigation? If we get to a point where we can't video it for whatever reason, and we have to go to an outside source, and the price is going to go out of sight, is there any limitation on that? Because I know we looked at things before where we didn't have the capability to do
Yes,
the
this is a
video.
little different as well because we haven't had any complaints of any sewer backups over there. So since the sewer is flowing downhill, we're hoping that when we TV it, there's no like major. But you never know. There could be a break.
And then what?
Well, if there's a break, then Tim, they TV it from the other way.
Yeah, we'll just mobilize to the other access point and come in from the other side and be able to televise it.
But who repairs the break before dedication?
That's another discussion.
Yeah, Mr. Weaver,
I think at this point in time, all we're doing is going to televise it to see if it's if it's dedicatable, or if there's issues in the line. Then we can have that discussion with whoever authorities we need to have it with to get it repaired.
Mr.
Right.
Weaver, just to follow, because what's our time frame for doing the work and then getting a report back? Do you have any idea?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have a new TV rig yet that the board
Okay.
authorized, and the old rig is broken down a lot, and we have a lot of work to do. Since their sewer system is operating right now, and I know they want to unload it quickly, but we'll have to get back to the board on what schedule.
Okay, I didn't know if it was a 2 week, 2 month,
It could be at least 2 weeks to a month till we get to
Sure,
it.
depending, I understand, on
Yep.
availability of equipment, equipment properly, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, but at least we've initiated the process for you to authorize the movement forward.
Can I ask the solicitor, do you know, has there been any issues over there? Have they
Not
shared? Has your
with the
client-
line itself. I believe there's been one or two lateral issues that have been homeowner association or homeowner responsibility. But
Okay.
the main line itself, I know of no issues. We have a couple people from the board here who can verify that.
Okay. All right, great, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll call for the question on the motion.
Thank you. I think we do this by voice vote. Well, go all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right, let's move on to the request from the property owner at 602 Drexel Road for reimbursement for the private sewer replacement. Mr. Weaver.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you have in your packet a letter from the property owner at 602 Drexel Road. They have submitted a bill from Pronto Plumbing that they incurred to replace their sewer line that was in a previous PC5 mini basin. This was our first mini basin that we did in 2004 or 5 area as a total replacement project, affectionately known as Devon Manor. This was an unusual situation. Just to give a brief explanation, total sewer replacement is that it's totally replaced everything. This was just a little different because staff felt that initially that cast iron pipe, because of the strength, may be able to pass an air test. So we thought that we would try to air test building sewers. We're a week into the project, and the contractor came to us and said, this is a bad idea. You should reconsider it because you dig inside the sidewalk to plug it, you dig at the house to test it, and you got 10, 15, 20 feet in between. I'm wasting time. I can dig the whole thing, and half the time I'm spending twice as much time to test it, and half of them or more are going to fail. So staff and engineer at that point agreed. We stopped air testing. This person, ironically, passed the air test. She was one of the first ones done, and so her sewer was working at that time. And we don't know what could have caused the collapse, but just recently, 15 years later, is that 15 years? Yeah, 15 years later, her sewer failed, and she wants compensated. When I talked to the engineer and the solicitor, we don't have a policy in place to pay her because the policy says that it has to be within a 10-year period. And the engineer is telling me that if we do pay her, of course you can do whatever you want, but if we replace her sewer, we're not going to see any net effect to our mini basin flows. So unfortunately, I think we're sort of aligned. I won't speak for Kevin and Steve, but I think we all agree that unfortunately we recommend that we don't reimburse the property owner for the sewer replacement.
So this was a collapse on her property, right? Between her house to the lateral.
Correct.
In the street.
And we have no idea what caused it.
And this, again, lateral we replaced 15 years ago back in Devon Manor.
We replaced to the curb. The place that collapsed, that was a cast iron that passed an air test. So that was
okay.
So that sewer is 65 years old. I mean, Devon Manor was built in this early 60s.
So I mean, 15 years ago it passed an air test.
Yep.
But we didn't go on her property and replace it. I mean,
nope.
I mean, anything could go bad in 15 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? So.
Well, the premise of her request is that everyone else in her neighborhood got a free sewer, so she deserves one. I think that's generally what she believes is a reasonable request. But unfortunately, that's not. We don't have a policy for it, and we don't think there'll be any net effect by her replacing her sewer on our mini basin flows because it's a big basin and one sewer at this point is not going to really have any. But again, the board, I think, we don't encourage this certainly, but it's your policy. You can amend it as you wish, and you can certainly select to reimburse her. But staff would not recommend it because we don't see any net effect. It certainly, Kevin, would reduce flows potentially, because it could have been creating some I&I, but we'd never be able to prove that in any way through a meter.
So, Bill, so the question I have for you is, let's say that we did replace her lateral.
Yep.
And it collapsed. I mean, are we going to go back and replace it 15 years later?
We are not, because the building sewer replacement agreement says that after we do the work, the property owner is responsible for all future maintenance. Correct.
Okay, and so I mean, I would take the approach that
right.
You know,
I never thought of that.
We did air test it 15 years ago, and I mean, and it worked. I mean, it's 15 years later. The other question I would have too is, that's the quote that she got from Pronto Plumbing, correct? That's up there?
We don't.
Or no?
All we know is she sent a letter saying she wanted this paid. We don't. Well, we did inspect it, Jim, right? Yeah.
She already paid it.
I mean, is that? But
She had the work done and she paid the bill.
But is that fee though that Pronto Plumbing charged? Is that reasonable or does that seem high?
Well, Tim, actually, I apologize. I'm not presenting this with all the facts. Tim, can you explain what you do for reimbursements? Tim would not recommend you pay the full amount if you do pay it, right?
Yeah, so there's some economies of scale that we recognize when we do mini basin projects that have like 500 homes associated with it. So what we do is we go through the most recent mini basin project and figure out what reimbursement would be appropriate if that house was on that most current project. So it usually ends up, it really depends on how much money that contractor put into the private side work, but I would say it usually ends up to be like 60 or so % of what the plumber is charging for that same work.
Okay. So if you do decide to reimburse the property owner, then staff would recommend
it'd be like $4,200 is what
you
it would
condition it upon the Tim staff engineer's recommendation.
Bill, let me ask you this. Every house on her street on Drexel, was their line all replaced? All their lines were replaced, but hers wasn't, from the curb in?
I can't tell you for a fact that they all were, but there's a high likelihood they were, because we did some testing the first week. There was only a few people that weren't replaced, and she happened to be one of them. So yes, there's
probably almost everybody.
Everybody on her street was probably.
Bill, as I read this letter, it says at that time, and I'm assuming at that time meant in 04, the plumber explained that the pipe from the house to the curb was damaged. That appears to me that the plumber is saying that we're the ones that caused the problem in 04.
Where's that in her letter? You say
first paragraph.
Paragraph at the end.
No, that's she's saying on January 16th, the plumber told him at that time, explained that the pipe was damaged in January 2020.
Yeah, but it was damaged from the house to the curb, and that's what was replaced from the house to the curb.
No.
It wasn't replaced by us.
That wasn't replaced by us, though. What happened was when we did the replacement program 15 years ago, we air tested it from the house to the curb because we're required to do that for all laterals. At the time, it tested fine.
Who damaged the pipe?
I think they're just saying it was damaged. It was in a damaged state. I don't think that they're saying something damaged it.
Right. I think the pipe is damaged when it stops operating properly. So the sewer's in the ground. You don't know it's damaged. I think she used a poor choice of words there. Yeah. So, I mean, basically what happens is you have a slow moving toilet. Normally it's when you do wash because that uses heavy water. So something precipitated her to call the plumber. Normally it's the wash machine backing up or a toilet. Right. So then Pronto Plumbing came out and said, yeah, you have a damaged pipe.
Right.
I think that's what she meant.
In 2004, apparently it was functioning properly.
Yeah.
So something happened between 2004 and 2020. No one had been digging up the ground or anything of that sort, but something occurred with the pipe, deterioration or something, roots, who knows, between 2004 and 2020.
And we had nothing to do
Mr.
with it.
Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Oakes, before the meeting, brought up a point on the bill. There was 20 feet of water line replaced because the water line was leaking.
Yeah,
that could facilitate subsidence underneath the lateral that could cause a failure
Yeah.
in the sewer system, which could have happened whether it was replaced with PVC back in 2004 or not.
Right.
And just to add, back in 2004, it was air tested and it passed an air test, so it wasn't damaged back
For
then.
our purposes tonight, I guess we just need to know that we
Yeah.
tested it, it was working, now it's not. And, you know, I can't say I blame her for asking. She, you know, her neighbors had it replaced, she asked, I don't think we can. But just to be clear, do we not test anymore when we come into neighborhoods and replace the lines, including from the house to the curb? We don't.
Only if the pipe is to today's standard. So actually, if it's PVC, we will test it. If it not cast iron, not a 60-year-old pipe. So new PVC that was built from starting in the 80s, 90s, 2000.
Okay.
We'll
So
actually,
if you know what's under there, well, you go look, I guess. So
we
so
have records that they're not.
You have record. Okay.
Yeah.
So if it's if it's PVC,
Yep.
it can withstand.
We
the
can
testing.
test it.
Okay, because I knew we were tested. I didn't know if that was a change in policy, but it has to do with the material of the pipe.
Correct. If it's
Okay.
PVC, we will test it, but we don't test cast iron anymore.
Right.
Ever since this job, actually, this started the process of no longer testing cast iron.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Weaver at this point? Hearing none, is there a motion on the floor regarding this request?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we deny the request from property owner at 602 Drexel Road for the reimbursement for the private sewer replacement as requested.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Chrisman. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Judd. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I think we can do this by voice vote as well. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So carried. All right, let's move on to the next item. A request from Triple Crown Corporation for a reduction in the 15% administration fees for developer escrow deposits. Mr. Weaver, you're up again.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you have in your packet an email from Mr. DeSanto and his senior accountant, Jennifer Logan. We've had this again later in the agenda. We'll talk about amending the rates for charging developers as part of the sewer extension agreement, a draft for the board to consider. Ironically, Mr. DeSanto, as we were going through that process, sent us an email objecting to the administrative fee. So the Authorities Act is specific. If a developer disputes a bill, he has 60 days from the date of receiving the bill to provide notice to the authority. The authority then has 60 days to render a decision. If the parties can't agree, then it goes to an arbitrator. So we do agree with Mr. DeSanto that the administrative fee appears to be excessive because he has such a large project and it's unusual in nature. So not every developer fits this. So because Blue Ridge and Stray Winds were such big projects and GHD's engineer was on the job, so our staff is sort of a pass-through on giving Triple Crown the engineering bill for the inspection. We marked it up 15%. So when you have bills over years, I mean, you can understand Stray Winds and Blue Ridge have been going on for years now. Blue Ridge, not as long, but Stray Winds is almost done, by the way. We just met with them today. They have Phase 7 to start in a few months, and they're going to be done in Lower Paxton. So he has $35,000 in outstanding bills for Stray Winds and $90,000 for Blue Ridge. So you're looking at round numbers, $100,000. So you do the math, 15%. We're charging him $15,000 for something that takes 5 hours of work. We would lose. I think Steve could do his best, but I don't know if we can consider that to be reasonable. So staff is recommending that the board authorize a reduction in the admin fee for Stray Winds Farms and Blue Ridge from the 15% to a flat fee of $250. And this is also going to be presented later as part of the Resolution 2002. But for right now, for Mr. DeSanto, staff is recommending a motion authorizing the staff to reduce their bill from 15% admin to $250 flat rate, which is basically 5 hours of staff time. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Weaver?
Well, and I guess it's correct to say that it is the law that we can't charge an unreasonable fee. when we
Correct.
do these.
It's
We have to
specific in the act that there has to be reasonable and necessary.
make it as close to recouping our actual costs.
Correct.
And so this is, I mean, we're trying to be fair, but we're also trying to obey the law.
Right.
By adjusting this. Okay.
And I did check with Susquehanna. Ironically, they're reconsidering, but right now they don't even charge an admin fee. So-
Any further questions?
Have we had
think-
other developers that have come in and asked for this and it was denied? Or is this the first time you can remember that
This is the first request in the
I'm sorry,
25 years.
Robin, I couldn't, excuse me, I
I
can't
asked
hear.
if there was other developers that had come in and asked for this request, and we denied it. And he's saying in 25 years, he doesn't remember anybody coming in.
No, this is the first time anyone's ever, and again, this is an unusual situation because you're talking about big development.
Okay.
Staff has reviewed it. This is staff's recommendation. I would support this if you, are you ready for a motion, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Crispin, I'm ready for a motion. I think that you're going to be the one that's going to make it.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the reduction to Triple Crown Corporation in the amount of 15% administrative fees for the developer for Blue Ridge Village and Stray Winds Farm as presented and recommended by Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Crispin. Motion's on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Zimis. Any further discussion?
Real quick, I don't want to belabor this, but these developer agreements, what's the range of projects that they cover? Would there be a real small project where $250 is a lot of money, or is that?
That's a good question. So the average escrow for a normal development is around $5,000, and the pass through from staff, regardless, is only going to be a couple hours work. It really depends on, throw GHD under the bus here, is how good a job they do and estimating what our costs are going to be. If we don't have to go back and ask for more money, I guess in a perfect world, we take the check, give it to Alicia, put it in the bank. They earn 1% interest. The project's over. Natalie from our office tells Alicia, release the check, whatever is left, and it's a one-time thing. If we have to go back and do it again, for smaller projects, you're correct, we probably won't have that. For bigger ones, it's hard for GHD to estimate, So, Steve and I battled with this when I asked him what he thought about the $250 flat rate. I think that's fair because you're going to have some a little over and some a little under. And to track staff time, I think you would waste money just having staff trying to track.
Okay, it's the closest we can get.
The
to
closest we
reasonable-
believe we can get to
Okay.
be reasonable.
Bill, could you do 250 flat rate or 15%, whichever is less?
In theory, you could.
Then the little small projects won't get hit with the big.
That would work, wouldn't it, Steve? I mean, we have an escrow. We can calculate 15%.
You could.
Yeah.
Unless at some point in time you realize that the 15% doesn't pay for, doesn't adequately reimburse for staff time, depending upon. I mean, I think on these projects, staff time for administration is probably relatively similar, no matter whether it's big or small. Is that right?
Yeah, it's basically the same couple hours to process it.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Zimis, in theory, I hear what you're saying and I agree with you, but I think for the amount of money that we're talking about here, you're almost going to spend that much money in administration to figure out what 15% is going to be versus just charging the $250. Yeah.
And that's what our thought process was. A flat fee is the easiest in keeping staff time down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, but you're not, but you're on target there, Mr. Zimis. I would agree, but I just think for being that it's $250 is probably better just to say it's a flat fee to do it. That would be that's just me talking. So
That's good. Yeah, I wanted to ask because you go from a percentage to a flat fee. You go from big projects and kind of you got to keep in mind the little ones too. But if this is as fair as we can be under law, then I'm for it.
So we do have a motion on the floor and a
Yes.
second for
Mr. Chairman, I'll call for the question on the motion.
question on the motion. Any other questions? Hearing none, we can do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right. Seeing that the audience has officially left,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
we're going to go to Resolution 200101 to 200103, authorizing the acquisition of temporary construction easements for a private sewer replacement in the BC 2A, BC, and 5B project. Property
Yes,
transfers.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the board has seen these on numerous occasions. This is basically just a resale. Because we don't record these hundreds and hundreds of temporary easements, when a property sale happens, Steve requires us to get a new agreement. It's not transferable. So these are 3 properties that sold, and they did not sign an agreement within the allotted 30 days, and staff recommends the approval of the 3 resolutions.
All right.
This is straightforward.
Yes, it is.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve resolutions 2020-01-01, 2020-01-02, and 2020-01-3, authorizing the acquisition of the temporary construction easements for the private sewer replacements in BC 2A, BC, and 5B property. The transfers as presented and recommended by Mr. Weaver.
Mr. Crispin, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Judd. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we can do this by voice vote too. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right. Melissa, dedication of developer installed sewers.
All right. Hopefully
That sounds pretty exciting.
It is.
All right.
Yeah, hopefully this is pretty straightforward for you too. I won't go too in depth since Bill has already done a pretty good job discussing all the dedication of sewers and why that's necessary, and why it's a good thing to do.
Let's not give Bill too much credit. All
No.
right. All right.
Other than being a straightforward, are there any exceptions to any of the 5 listed?
No,
Or 4, I'm sorry.
The only 2 that the Straywinds Farm and Shadebrook that I have asterisks, we're in the process of working through getting all the signatures and everything on those, but I kind of wanted just to put them in front of you now. So we anticipate getting those any day now. So instead of waiting for the next board meeting, we just kind of wanted to get those.
Thank you, because I was going to address the asterisks. I have an idiosyncrasy. Unless staff overrides my idiosyncrasy, I never like to approve anything until everyone else has signed documents. You know that, Mr. Weaver. So my question to staff is, I'm willing to support this on the condition that you, staff, guarantee this is going to be done within the week.
Come on,
Within a
Bill,
week, I don't
you
know
have
if
to
I
show
want to
some hustle.
guarantee that, so I guess we could wait on the other 2, the asterisk ones.
Okay, I'm just a stickler for that particular piece. So again,
Are they Straywinds and Shadebrook?
Yes.
Are they
yes, Straywinds and Shadebrook.
And those documents have been transmitted to the developer?
Straywinds, I would be comfortable with getting those back pretty soon. Shadebrook, I'm still kind of working through with them to get the deed and the plats and legals finished. So that one, I think if it's got to be a week, I would wait on the Shadebrook till the next meeting.
I'm only one authority member, but that's a pet peeve of mine, only because I've been caught in situations where...
We could certainly revise our request to include just the first 3 and bring Shadebrook back in May, if the board
Is that
desires.
going to be a problem to bring Shadebrook back in May?
I don't believe so.
I don't believe so either.
No.
Well, there's a difference between believing so and knowing so.
Well, no, the sewers are functioning now.
Okay.
We have a extension agreement amendment that allows the developer to get permits and occupy and put sewer into it, even though it's not dedicated. We developed that amendment. So this is just perfecting the dedication.
Okay, so we're going to take Shadebrook off. We're going to keep Autumn Oaks, Amber Fields, and Straywin Farms phases 5A and 5B in here under the knowledge that we're going to have all the signed parties on these documents within the next 96 hours. Is that right?
We know the DeSantis will. They were just meeting with us today. We know they're going to get it to us.
What was that mumbling?
I didn't mumble anything.
Okay.
I totally
and
totally
again,
agree with
this
Mr.
is the
Crispin that
combined staff. I'm calling you combined staff. There's a guarantee that Straywinds will sign within the week.
Yes. Yeah,
I heard a yes. I want to make sure it's recorded. Shelley.
Make sure you do some good
I
hustle.
will.
on that
I will
now.
talk to Nick tomorrow morning and make sure that they get that signed and over to us.
Okay. Any further questions? Is there a motion? Mr. Crispin, you're all over it, right?
I'll do it. Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the dedication of the developer-installed sewers for Autumn Oaks Phases 2 and 3, Amber Fields Phase 7, Stray Winds Farm Phases 5A and 5B, conditioned upon signature of all documents within 1 week of today's date.
Mr. Crispin, very well done. Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Judd. Any further discussion? Any board members? Okay. I think we can do this by voice vote as well. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right. Action on Resolution 2002, establishing the developer-installed sewer fee schedule. That looks like that's you, Mr. Weaver.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'll just stay here because I think these next two will be pretty quick. We've talked about this at length tonight. This resolution is just, again, perfecting what we've been doing for the last 25 years when Mr. Wolf and Mr. Stein and I presented to the authority at that time the recommendation to have financial security agreements, a professional services contract, and a sewer extension agreement. Since there's a new board and we didn't establish by resolution the new fees, we thought it'd be appropriate to present to the board a resolution to establish the fees for 2020, and at the same time, while we had the Triple Crown issue, we could also revise the administrative fee to allow for a flat fee of $250 to be deposited in advance with the initial escrow deposit. So this resolution essentially will be known as the developer-installed sewer fee schedule. This is similar to the township resolution that supervisors are aware of that establishes on an annual basis all the township fees. And this is for developer-installed sewer projects. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So, Bill, I got a question for you. Like, what was the analysis that you came up with to get the Lower Paxton Township construction inspector's fee of $63.66?
Oh,
like,
yes.
How did you come up with that?
That's a good
We
question.
couldn't just round it up to $65 flat, or
Well, I apologize.
or was there like some master calculation on that one? Or?
No, because of the size of our packet and the agenda for this particular meeting, I did not have the time to round up. I took what Alicia gave me from the finance department and I plugged and played.
Okay.
So that is, I'm glad you'd mentioned that, because when we first started this 25 years ago, there were members of the board that supported charging developers, but they didn't want to charge the full rate. So there was a motion by, I won't say what board members they were. They're not on the board anymore, so it doesn't matter. But they said that at that rate, at that time, the overhead was $40. They wanted to charge $20. So we have been underbilling ourselves for many years. But ironically, it appears we've been overcharging the admin fee. So I think we're about even. So we do recommend the 66, or you could round up to 64 if the board desires.
I just kind of feel like
Let's make it 65.
I kind of feel like $65.
Let's just round it to
makes
65.
more sense.
That works for
So,
staff.
Would that be a recommendation?
That would be a recommendation to staff that we revise our proposed fee schedule for the hourly rate for inspectors township to be $65 an hour.
Okay.
Thank you.
One more question, and this is for you, Mr. Stein. Just out of curiosity, Mr. Stein, I'm looking at your letter, and it says $190 for general representation and $210 for litigation matters. Like the extra $20 for litigation matters? What is that? Is there something special on the litigation side, or is that just
Anticipation.
pulling the knowledge out of your head for $20 more?
Well, usually you're a lot busier when there's a matter of litigation. So
It's kind of like
that's why the difference.
It's kind of like accountants, right? Like during January to April, you're a lot busier, so your fees are higher than they are outside of taxes, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I get it. Okay. All right. Is there any other questions for Mr. Weaver?
I think they are.
Any other questions for Mr. Weaver?
No. Are you ready for a motion?
I'm ready for a motion, Mr. Chrisman.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Resolution 2020-0 to establish developer-installed sewer fee schedule as listed, however, with the Lower Paxton Township construction inspection fee reflects $65 per hour.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chrisman. Is there a second to Mr. Chrisman's motion?
I'll second it.
I was looking at you, Mrs. Lindsay. I knew you were going to make that second. All right, Mrs. Lindsay's got the second. Is there any other further discussion? Okay, hearing none, I think we can do this by voice vote as well. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? So carried. I do want to say, GHD, it is duly noted that your discounted rates, we really appreciate that. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure working with you, so I just want to make sure you're aware of that. Okay, Resolution 2002 or 2003, authorizing the solicitor and the sewer system engineer to establish, maintain, and release improvement guarantees for developer-installed sewer extensions.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Again, I apologize for my haste makes waste. I do have a mistake on the agenda as well. The title of the agenda says authorizing the engineer and the solicitor to approve, but I made the correction on the resolution and I forgot to change the agenda. So Resolution 20-03, again, is just perfecting what we've already been doing, which is authorizing the sewer department director to execute all agreements. So we don't have to take them to the board because we only meet every 3 months. And also will allow me to have the ability to release letters of credit. Steve and I met. There's nothing in the Authorities Act that requires the board to officiate that. If you're willing to allow me to do that, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion because the engineer has to decide. Really, the authority does it. The engineer does it. So once the engineer does it, I believe I can execute. So I had a mistake on the agenda. So the actual resolution is authorizing the sewer department director to approve financial security agreements, developer agreements for developer-installed sewer extensions on his behalf, including the release requests in accordance with the Municipal Authorities Act and procedures established by the authority. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Weaver?
Well, just the fact that he's usurping all the power, he's taking away from solicitors' advice.
All right, hearing no questions, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Resolution 2020-03, which authorizes the sewer department director to execute the developer agreements and financial security agreements associated with developer-installed sewer projects in accordance with the Municipality Authorities Act as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chrisman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Zumas. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, I think we can do this by voice vote as well. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right, township reports. Mr. Knoll.
I'm going to stay here just so I can I'm not turning away and pointing at the screen to show you items and then not talking into the mic. So I'm going to provide an update on the BC 2A, 2B, 2C, 5B project. Brad, if you can go ahead and open up the map go back to the status report. And up top there's a link. Yeah. So for anybody following along at home, these maps that I'm going to show you tonight are all available on the township's general website. If you go in and navigate on the front page to the sanitary sewer section, I think it's sanitary sewer, stormwater, and projects, it takes you to our project webpage. So this is an ArcGIS online map that we've created for the BC 2A, 2B, 2C, 5B project. Just real briefly, what that provides us with the ability to do is you can see it's a basic color-coded kind of work area type of map. And we're able to make changes on our end in the office and then, instantaneously push that out to the public so that they can see this information. Brad, if you go up to the little address bar there and just type in like 6200 Nassau, like Nassau. So if you type your address in, just randomly here, you're able to click on the parcel or just click kind of any area in the blue. So this provides you with a summary of, our contractor, Dolly Construction, is planning to be in that area working between January and May of this year. So this map is based on the initial schedule that they provided to us. We encourage residents to take a look at this, and it is going to be updated, I'm sure, quite frequently with Dolly and changes in schedule. Brad, if you zoom back out again so you can kind of see the whole area. So as you can see, this is a pretty massive project, big area that we're talking about. Just kind of frame of reference, here's Route 81. Up here is Linglestown Road, and Blue Ridge Avenue is kind of right here in the middle. So it's the largest sanitary sewer project that we've undertaken. It's just about, round numbers, 7.5 miles of mainline replacement, 190 manholes, and about 530 laterals and building sewers. Point of emphasis, in addition to being such a large sanitary undertaking, it's also probably one of the larger storm sewer replacement projects that we've taken on as well. There's about 2 miles of storm sewer replacement and about 125 structures. So you're going to be hearing me talk about this project for probably the next year and a half, just providing updates. Brad, if you go back into that Nassau area, Dolly at this point is working. There you go. They have the sewer main line replaced between the cul-de-sac in Nassau, basically the whole way. If you drag the map and go up this way a little bit, their mainline crew is working near the intersection of Florence and Jerome at this point. So then their lateral crews are working in behind and replacing laterals, and there's also, like I said, a storm sewer component. And on Nassau Road itself, that's probably the biggest stormwater issue we had on this entire project. So their residents will be happy that we're taking care of the issue out there.
The blue areas where the work, that's phase 1, right?
That is the first work area. So sorry, Brad, but if you zoom out one more time, just to go briefly through sequence, they're starting in the blue area, area 1, and then they're moving to the yellow. If you click on each one of these as I go through, it tells you approximate dates where they're going to be in these certain areas. Then they're going to move to the green area, this one right here. Then the purple area, and then the orange or red kind of to the left of, go up a little bit there. I would say orange. Let's call it orange. To the left.
It's burnt orange.
Yeah.
It's orange.
So that kind of gives you an idea of initial project schedule, how they're going to progress through the project. Like I said, it's going to change a lot as we go through, and we just encourage residents to get on here and take a look at updates. Really not a whole lot to report about the project itself. They're about 6% complete with the pipe work at this point. So at this point, I can entertain any questions that the board might have.
We do the usual outreach, community outreach stuff with this. Do we do that with every project?
Yeah, we have the neighborhood meeting.
Yeah.
When the project is under design. And on this, we're using the Civic Ready, so we have the ability to communicate with the public.
And now we have a page to direct people to.
Yeah.
Say here to go there, follow it, updates and stuff like that. That's awesome.
Yeah, just a plug for Tim and GHD. So we're fortunate to have GHD has a talented person, Todd Plank, in their GIS department. Tim has a lot of background in GIS from working at Gannett Fleming and Act One, and the two of them together
I think what they've done here is pretty impressive. So
Is that the first time we've had that, where you can click on the map and?
Well, yes. Todd created the stormwater link you can link like that and see your impervious surface for your.
That's where we started.
That's
Yeah.
where we started.
Okay.
And Tim and Todd came up with the idea to do this story map to tell people when they're going to be doing the
That's
sewer
great.
work. Yeah.
That's great.
So I wanted to give that plug.
Good job. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was out there last week visiting a friend, and they're very happy with the way that Dolly is conducting them. Yeah, and it was right on Nassau. Yeah.
No more questions, and Jim has a brief report on Spring Creek, and I can clean up here with a couple quick things on bond issue.
Let's do it. Keep it going.
Yeah, good evening, board members. Yeah, Spring Creek, it's the SC2B mini basin area that is encompasses the Twin Lakes development, Twin Lakes South, and the properties on Union Deposit Road from Page Road up to Southside Elementary School. So there's a total of 131 properties in there. This is the basin that our staff, I&I crew is working in, and of the 131 properties that we have to do, 96 have been completed, so we're about 73% completed. We anticipate finishing with all our pipe replacement in early April. That is if we, continue and the weather cooperates with us. Of the 96 properties that are done, probably a little over half of them are totally done with their yard restoration, sidewalk paving, any of that type of replacement. So we'll be putting out a work order here soon within the next probably month for concrete replacement, and we have a contract getting ready to look at for lawn restoration, so we'll get somebody in and get those done then. So like I said, we have approximately 35 properties left to go, and estimating to be completed by April, early April.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions on that? Nope.
Stop. Jim, on that one, look at the two white properties in the middle of all that. Are they not finished? Or
They are not
why
finished.
They're isolates.
One was a condemnation, and the other one, actually, they were both condemnations that we had to skip over. So we'll get back to those.
Visually, they just stuck out like, okay, what are they standing there for alone?
Steve had to go to the mattresses on those.
Steve. Thank you, Steve. Sorry for it, but it just kind of popped out. Thanks for the explanation.
Bill, why do people not want, to sign the paperwork to have it taken care of? I mean, is it because they don't want their yard tore up?
He said they were condemnation.
No, but I'm just,
That's a good question.
Well, actually, I can maybe explain that.
Yeah, Steve.
A lot of times the people get the document and they put it aside and they forget about it. Or sometimes the properties are vacant.
Okay.
The other thing is sometimes the people look at it, don't understand, and they'll say, hey, I'll deal with that later. And they're just not interested. So it's, I think, a combination of a lot of things. It's not that they don't want to cooperate, because a lot of times I'll get a call after a condemnment, and the guy says, oh, he said, we forgot to send that back.
Okay.
So
I was just curious.
That's what it is for the most part.
Okay. All right. Why don't we move on to the update on the 2020 bond issue?
Yes, board members, I can kind of sum all these up together. So we had the annual report with Sweatera, and they have a new dryer that is needed. It's $6 million. We're 57%. So you tag that along with our next report, which is basically that we have an overflow in the Spring Creek Interceptor on a borderline flood event. So we have to meet with DEP. Steve and I met yesterday with GHD. We had a conference call. There's some things that aren't clear in our consent order on what our peak capacities are in Spring Creek, but the engineer is saying correctly that we don't have an excused event and we have an overflow. So we have a problem that we have to address in Spring Creek that we didn't anticipate. We didn't anticipate doing work in there 4 or 5 years from now. So you put the dryer in there, and you put in the Spring Creek work, and then you put in Paxton Creek, North Branch, that Susquehanna is telling us that we have to do that as well. And we're loading up all this work to eliminate this backlog of work we have to do in Beaver Creek, because we went crazy in Paxton Creek. We were negotiating with Beaver Creek. With all that said, right now we have on the table $32 million that we have to borrow in July, and we're going to add Spring Creek onto that, and another Beaver Creek project where we have manholes that are basically shot and the creek goes into them along Nyes Road. So all the manholes along there, when the creek comes up, pours right in. That's an important project. So we don't have an estimate for you right now that's accurate. GHD is going to finish it this week. We're going to meet with Jay and John and Tom Smita. They're going to meet with the supervisors in March and give them the bad news that we're going to have to borrow $35 to $37 million. And when should we do that? What are the rates? They'll go through all that with the Board of Supervisors. They'll come to the authority and tell them that you're going to have to do a subsidy agreement. And at that time, GHD and staff can present a complete recommendation on what to borrow and close in July. It won't affect tremendously rates until down the road. Basically, we have about $7 million we didn't account for in the next 15 years, but we have rates spread out for 20 years. You know, you may see the board wanted us to keep them at 2.8%. When we come in August, they may have to be 3.2, who knows, 3.5. But right now, we don't know those answers. But I wanted to alert the board that we just closed on a Penvest loan for $17 million, and now we're going to borrow $35. It's an alarming amount of money. I am sort of concerned that this is the whole staff right here. You're looking at it. We manage $35 million. We're the third or fourth largest authority in the state, and Brad has been taking us around visiting other townships, and they have pretty much 2 or 3 times the staff that we have. So I'm just hoping, you know, we can continue our success of being able to get these projects bid. Tim does a great job of keeping them aligned and in order. But this is the largest bond issue that we've ever done. So Tim just explained we're doing the largest sewer project we've ever done. Ironically now, we're doing the largest bond issue that that's not true. We did a $42 million one back in about 10 or 15 years ago.
That was the Babs bonds, right?
That was the BAB bond. So this is the second largest we've ever done, yes. So that concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
So what's the good news?
The good news is the program's working, and we eliminated overflows in Paxton Creek 7 years in advance. So that's the good news.
Starting to get worried about these road tours that you take people on, Brad. They get to see all the staffing in the other townships.
Yes, that's not the intent. But the intent is how we use the staff we have to best exemplify our operations. So
we are, Brad, that's
grateful.
A very good point.
Well, I understand.
And you've identified it when you visit other places,
yes,
and they have double the staff,
right,
and we don't.
Right.
I'll take our 5 brains over 10 or 15 of them. We have the expertise, we have the knowledge, and I applaud your efforts.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your comments. And let me explain really quick. My intent was not to describe that. My intent was to describe that we have a job for the authority to make sure you stay in compliance. And when you borrow that kind of money, you have to spend it in 3 years, and you have to achieve these consent order, court order requirements, and we've achieved that. But it just gets you a little nervous from staff and engineer when you have this much. So we plan on achieving it, because a lot of them were just going to write a check, but it is the biggest one we've done in a long time.
And don't worry, we hear that a lot from Brad for other things. Don't worry about it. You were not out of line, and we should know that this is significant.
Right.
You know, the board should know that, so I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, Bill, real quick, we don't know what the final number is right now for any type of debt issuance at this point. So we're still trying to iron that number out. And in March, that's when we're going to have the consultants come in and talk about what the bond issue would look like, when we would be able to go to market with the bond issue.
That's
and
correct.
Is that correct?
Yes, they normally need 2 or 3 months. Jay and John will have to tell the board what to expect there,
Yeah.
but with a large issue like this, we need to nail it down quickly, and then they're going to have to get started with the supervisors and the bond rating and the whole
So I
nine
get,
yards. So.
yeah. So I guess the good news is if we're going to go do a bond offering, I mean, interest rates are very low, and the bond market doesn't appear like that's going to improve anytime soon in regards to interest rates. So that's a good thing that we'll have low rates,
right?
To do a bond issue. But yeah, $35+ million. I mean, I remember doing the 42 million. I think that was 2009 when we did the BAB bonds. Yeah. So I remember it during that time doing that. So that is a lot of money.
It is. Our goal was to try to do $7 million a year, $21 million max over 3 years. That's about what our staff could handle.
Right.
But we have efficient people, and they are getting better, and so we totally plan to achieve our objectives. But just want to point out this is the second largest issue we've ever done.
Right. Okay. Is there any other questions at this point?
Bill, where was that approximate area where the overflow was at Spring Creek?
I was at Dartmouth.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Just in between Dartmouth. It's actually called Slosnick Run. If you remember the Slosnick's house, they sold that.
Yeah,
They named it after them, I guess, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that run needs to be replaced. It's 60 years old. It's 4 routes. That's basically what we're going to have to pay for. We never finished that piece of pipe in there. It's about 6 or 7 manhole runs.
Thank you.
All right. On to one of the best items of the whole night, the sanitary sewer report.
Thank you, Mr. Blaine, and
it's.
I'd like to thank the whole board for
I remember one of
GHD.
our former members on this board used to love this report. Just loved it.
Yes, I remember that too, and I'm glad you've taken up that tradition of loving the engineer's report. A lot of what is in our engineer's report has been discussed tonight. I just want to mention the one big project that we are probably working on the most is the BC 7 and 8 project. I know Mr. Hines mentioned HRG's also working on storm sewer. We've been coordinating with them lately. And you can see on the agenda, Bill didn't talk about it, but there is a public meeting scheduled, one of probably 2 or 3 public meetings that we'll have for this project on March the 24th. And just for perspective, I would say BC 7 and 8, in the center is Springgate Winery. So it goes kind of the part of Paxtonia that we didn't do a couple years ago, all the way down to Fairmont Road. It's kind of a sprawling area, almost as big as the BC2 project that Tim was showing you. Maybe not quite, but it's pretty close in size and number of customers. Melissa and Josiah have been really busy with development work, and I'll just open it up to any questions you might have about our report.
Any questions on the sanitary sewer report by GHD?
Which one is the March 24th meeting for? Which project?
It's the BC 7 and 8. I guess are there some customers in BC 8, or is it all?
BC 7, Mr. Judd, actually you asked this question earlier, do we test PVC? This is specific just for PVC customers. There's about 190 of them. The whole project's about 490. But we have a separate meeting just for PVC because they're treated differently because we air test them. So that's who they are.
Oh, okay.
We're having the Devon Church has been gracious enough to allow us to use their church right across from Springgate.
It's following the same model that Bill started with the BC2 project, where we do the PVC people first so that the township crews can get in there and start doing the testing and the building sewer work. And then we follow that up with the replacement areas. And I suspect, since it's such a big area, we might break that down into 2 areas like we did for BC2, just to keep it manageable.
Okay. Any other questions? I think Miss Lindsay has a question.
I just had a question about the Nyes Road in Devonshire. It says that the sewer replacement is currently on hold. So they're not gonna do all the work and then we're gonna come in after? How's that gonna work out?
I'll let Melissa answer that because she's managing that project. I know there was some initial sewer work that they were able to do, and it's kind of being phased.
Yeah, they'll still do the sewer work before they do most of the road work. That one, it's being staged so they can get everything that's not in nice. So they don't have to close the road at the time. When they do close the road, they'll do the sewer work, and I think they're raising the road about 4 or 5 feet,
3 feet
in that location.
They had originally
So they're
told
going
us.
to kind of do that all at the same time,
Okay.
so that they can close.
Okay.
The
I was
road
just
and
curious
do it
when
all
I
at once.
saw it was on hold, so, okay, great, thank
Yeah,
you.
'cause, I just wanted to mention that because we did have one of our GHD inspectors out there, and they've done the sewer work that's kind of off of the road on Nye and then up on Devonshire Heights. Yes, Devonshire
Yeah,
Heights.
where they're putting that other lane. Yeah, okay,
That part's done.
okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, any further comments by the board? All right, hearing none before we adjourn. Next meeting will be Tuesday, May 26, 2020, 7 o'clock start right here at the Municipal Center, Lower Paxton Township. If there is no other further questions, I will hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Hey, Bill.